Hello hunters, my name is Dark Hero, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and IGN has released their Sunbreak review, and apparently it isn't all that good. A few people have told me to look at it, and two of my friends actually that don't even play Monster Hunter told me about this review, and people in the comments weren't all that happy with it. So I thought, why not, let's take a good look at it. Now, IGN is notorious for giving some bad games good review scores, and that's why some people usually say that an 8 or a 7 out of 10 from IGN usually means that it's like a 5, maybe even less than that. But also that a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 could just be a 7 or an 8. So, of course, we're going to be taking these review scores with a grain of salt. So as you can see, I have the like to dislike ratio extended installed, and it's not looking very good. So let's take a look at the description. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak is a relatively simple expansion, but that doesn't mean its top-notch new and returning monsters aren't a whole lot of fun to fight. That said, Sunbreak isn't nearly as substantial or surprising as Iceborne was for Monster Hunter World, lacking fresh ideas beyond clever AI followers that are restricted to single-player hunts, and even abandoning rampage quests without really trying to fill the gap their absence has left. Okay, so just from reading this, I'm kind of expecting that some of the dislikes comes from the author of the review, Tom Marks. Just comparing Sunbreak to Iceborne, there were a few reviews in the past, made by IGN also, that got a lot of negative reception because they spent a good majority of the time just comparing it to other games. The last one I can think of was Shin Megami Tensei 5, which was compared a lot to Persona 5. But anyways, let's get started.
Alright, let's do this one more time. You're a hunter, and monsters are threatening your adorable little town. You're given a quest list full of creatures to track down and turn into funny hats, and you'll do just that until the townsfolk are safe, your build is optimized, and your outfit is as fly as your wire bugs. If you've played Monster Hunter World's Iceborne expansion, or pretty much any of Monster Hunter's major re-releases before it, then Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak is going to be a very familiar Palamute ride through the park. It's a fairly formulaic DLC, full
Okay, so right off the bat, he already has compared Sunbreak to Iceborne in the first 20 seconds of the review. And I can already tell that the big premise of this review is going to be that Sunbreak is just more of the same, which I would argue that's what most expansions are. And also I think that Sunbreak does a good job differentiating itself from the base Rise game, but maybe it's something that isn't as noted by people that don't spend as much time with the games or know about all of the systems that go into it.
Full of exciting new foes and a couple cool new locales, and even though it doesn't really have a ton of interesting surprises of its own, the quality of those additions reinforces just how fun that formula can be.
Okay, yeah, again, mentioning the formula, how it's more of the same. But of course it's always fun because it's Monster Hunter.
Sunbreak is essentially structured like a brand new game, introducing the functionally identical hub town of Elgato to operate out of, and a fresh storyline there to follow. That story is once again a largely ignorable and entirely predictable tale about how something is making the local monsters all hot and bothered, this time set in the European-themed kingdom rather than the Japanese-inspired Kimura. Its characters are at least slightly more interesting this time around, but plot has never been the draw of the mainline Monster Hunters, and that certainly doesn't change here.
Yeah, Monster Hunter has never really been too much about the story. The only one that I can really think of that focused on the story was for Ultimate. And he doesn't really seem to really care that much or emphasize that that's a flaw of the game. More so that it's a trait of the series and he embraces it, which I think is a really good thing by the reviewer here.
As has become the time-honored tradition, the expansion immediately makes all of your gear irrelevant by introducing Master Rank, a higher tier of hunts full of more difficult versions of the base game's monsters, as well as an assortment of new and returning monsters to take on. That's not a complaint though, as it's legitimately fun to have the bar reset so drastically, with plenty of powerful armor pieces and weapon upgrades to gleefully chase all over again. And while it's by no means a new trick in Monster Hunter's bag, one of Master Rank's greatest strengths has always been that it gives monsters altered behaviors and fresh moves to make them a renewed challenge without just raising their stats. Both the brand new monsters and the ones returning from previous Monster Hunter games continue Rise's trend of being as stellar to look at as they are to fight. A new trio referred to as the Three Lords are all particularly great. Garangolm's rocky ape-like appearance disguises its explosive mobility and surprising elemental effects. Lunagaron puts a fun twist on a traditional werewolf theme. And Malzeno's vampire-inspired moveset genuinely shocked me the first time I saw it blink around the battlefield. Older returning foes like Astalos and Gormagala fit right in as well, looking better than ever while providing an excitingly fresh challenge for anyone who hasn't had a chance to face them before.
So far I see nothing wrong with this review. I was scared that actually the reviewer wasn't going to be someone that has played the game extensively and hasn't gotten to the later parts of the game, including the end game, but he has shown that at least he got to Gormagala, which was somewhat far in the story of the expansion, so that's a relief. And he also shows appreciation for all of the monsters getting new movesets, and of course the hunter also getting new movesets with their weapons, and the fact that he isn't upset at everything being pretty much reset with the expansion. Because I was looking at some Steam reviews, because I'm also planning on making a video covering some bad Steam reviews, and some people are actually really upset by the fact that their progress is essentially reset in the Sunbreak expansion because, you know, their weapons and armor sets just aren't useful here. You are back to square one and you need to start farming new weapons and armor sets again. And the reviewer seems to appreciate that because it would be boring if the game were to not do that. So again, so far so good. Let's see the rest.
As for where you'll do that, Sunbreak adds 2 new locales. The Jungle, a tropical island originally introduced in Monster Hunter 2 that has been masterfully reimagined thanks to Rise's seamless 3D maps, and the Citadel, a delightfully eclectic space that can stretch a single hunt from poisoned swamps to snowy peaks to a huge ruined castle. While I liked the Citadel more thematically, the Jungle's condensed layout makes it Rise's most convenient map to hunt on yet. It feels as if—
I agree, the jungle map is fantastic. They did a fantastic job with it. It has a lot of the older classic areas, but a lot of it has been redesigned to become a lot more modern, so to say, to be able to work with the great wire bugs and with all of the mobility the hunters have. And it is genuinely a joy to explore that map, and I never get tired or bored of it. If you think about Monster Hunter World, for example, I hated the Ancient Forest because it was such a big map and it was so hard to navigate certain areas in it. But here this map is very simple and straightforward, has a lot of ways to navigate, and there are plenty of small secrets left for you to find and discover. It's just a fantastic map.
As if it learned the valuable lesson that collecting Speary Birds for a stat boost at the start of each quest shouldn't be such a hassle too, giving you a
I didn't even realize this. That's right, they put all of these Spirit Birds here available for you at the start. I totally forgot about this. I usually just ignore the Spirit Birds and collect them if they appear on my screen as I go toward the monster. But I do get that some people have this as part of their preparation route for the monster and they try to collect as many as they can before a hunt. So that's a cool detail that I hadn't picked up on actually.
Wire bug ride away from your starting tent. But both locales are quite entertaining to explore in their own ways, packed with even more little secrets waiting to be found.
Nice view.
Speaking of fixing some of the mistakes of Rise, rampages have been given the boot to an almost—
That's right,
comical
no
degree.
more
Rampage
rampages.
quests don't seem to have been updated in any way. The rampage weapon tree is
Didn't care
practically
about
the
them.
only one that didn't get extended with new upgrade options, and new weapons scrap the rampage skill system entirely in favor of a decoration slot that's only fillable with special rampage decorations, which have no connection beyond the name. It's a stunning reversal, though not an entirely surprising one given how dull the repetitive nature of Rampage quests eventually became. But while I'm not shedding any tears over the abandonment of Rampages, it also stands out that nothing has been introduced to take their place. I was glad Capcom decided to experiment with a new quest type like that, even if its appeal ultimately didn't last, and the fact that a central feature of Rise has been gutted rather than improved in Sunbreak leaves this expansion feeling far thinner.
So I don't necessarily agree with this. It makes sense what he is saying, that maybe they should have added a big game mode type of quests, something very different. But I don't really know what you could do with Monster Hunter. And I think a comparable feature would be the follower quests, which has a lot of benefits, and they're actually a lot more fun than I expected. I came into Sunbreak with no expectations of the follower quests, but turns out I actually really like them. And I wish that you could take the followers with you on just pretty much every single quest that is available in the game, and maybe just have some specific key quests where you cannot bring followers with you, but most of them you should be able to bring them with you, because even during the story, there are a few moments where you bring Fiorayne, for example, with you. So I don't see why there are only a specific amount of quests where you're able to take those followers with you. But yeah, I feel fine about the Rampages no longer being in the game. Of course, there were some fans of the Rampages that are left without them now, but I also think that it's good that the developers didn't spend time paying attention to a feature that the large majority of the player base just didn't enjoy.
That's especially true compared to the likes of Iceborne, which introduced clever new ideas of its own to world, most notably the Guiding Lands as an interesting take on its endgame. In contrast, later on, Sunbreak just ramps up monster difficulty with a small but amusing twist I can't spoil, and while that certainly kept me—
So wait, when talking about the Rampages, he brings up the Guiding Lands, which is an endgame system, and he knows that, he mentions that here in the review. But then he also compares the Guiding Lands to the endgame of Sunbreak, but he cannot talk about it here? I don't really agree with him doing this, because why mention the Guiding Lands if you cannot talk about the endgame of Sunbreak? I get that the Guiding Lands was a big feature, you essentially get a whole new map to explore, and you can even level up the different areas as you start hunting there and going to be getting all of those materials that you need to augment your weapons and whatnot. It was a good feature, although it had a lot of problems in my opinion, especially if you're the type of player that spent a lot of time in Iceborne trying to get all the areas leveled up and getting all sorts of materials from there. But if you're a more casual player, I can see how the Guiding Lands could be such a cool feature because it is a whole new area for you. But again, I don't see the point in mentioning the Guiding Lands if you're not going to talk about the endgame of Sunbreak.
Me happily playing, it doesn't inspire the same sort of newfound excitement. To be clear, there is plenty to do in Sunbreak. After more than 40 hours, I still have gear I want to chase and optional tasks I want to complete, but there just aren't that many fresh ideas to help it stand out as a whole lot more than a bunch of cool new monsters to fight. To that end, nearly every mainline quest sticks to the standard hunt format, with nothing like World's colossal Zora Magdaros fights, Iceborne's Celiana defense against Velkhana, or even Rise's admittedly one-note rampages to at least try and shake things up.
That is a good point. We don't have a single siege here, and even though he mentions the Zora Magdaros siege as an example, which was a hunt that most people didn't really enjoy, especially if you had to farm Zora Magdaros for his armor set or anything in particular, it was a very boring hunt that took like 20 to 30 minutes, and you didn't even get to hunt the monster essentially, you were just mining for parts and using cannons. It really didn't feel like Monster Hunter. But there are a lot of cool sieges that are present in World and Iceborne, like the Kulve siege. And also he brings up the example of Velkhana invading Celiana. And that was a really cool type of quest. It felt very different. You had access to that cannon rail. And it took place on a different map, which I don't think you could access until they added Arch-Tempered Velkhana. So yeah, that is a good point in my opinion. It would be really cool if they were to add a different type of quest or a more memorable quest like that instead of just having all regular hunts here in the game.
Again, every single quest I went on was still a ton of fun, but Sunbreak can start feeling pretty familiar by the end.
Let's see how you handle this!
Again, it goes back to it's more of the same, and he doesn't really like that, which is understandable.
Is in its follower quests. As you progress up Master Rank, townsfolk in both Elgato and Kimura will ask to accompany you on specific single-player quests as AI-controlled hunters.
Yeah,
Doing
this is
their
a
quests
really
will
cool
unlock
feature.
Those people as options in support survey quests, also limited to single-player, where you can pick 2 as your party members. The hunts themselves aren't exactly challenging or unique, but the AI is surprisingly sophisticated, using items.
The AI seems to be really good here. Like, I took Fiorain with me, and she was using Sword and Shield, and she countered with Shoryugeki a lot of times. And I also put someone else on Charge Blade, maybe it was also Fiorain, and she was even using guard points on the Charge Blade. So the AI is actually pretty good and might actually be better than some players that you were able to get in a random hunt online, which is just really funny.
Mounting monsters, and even placing traps before standing behind them and emoting for you to come in.
Oh, I've never seen this before.
Here, Asa.
I don't think I've seen any of my followers doing that.
Single-player campaign or anything, with follower quests still initially unlocked through multiplayer story progress, but it does make grinding for specific monster parts on your own a whole lot more
Yeah,
fun.
the quests are
The
just
followers
more
you bring
engaging,
along
and
will banter
it can
music
have
with
some funny interactions where the followers talk with each other, or sometimes there are just some cool moments, like the moments I was talking about with Fiorain, where they just pull off some cool stuff, and it makes the hunts just feel more unique, and that's a really cool thing. So I'm glad that he agrees with me here.
And it was nice to get to know these characters better by actually going.
Yeah,
out
it's
into
really
the
cool
field
when
and
they
hunting
banter.
with
For
them.
example, the Kimura twins, they always have a cool thing to say.
Followers are so well implemented, in fact, that it's a bit disappointing you can't use them to fill empty seats in multiplayer quests as well.
He agrees with me again. This is exactly what I said. Why can't we have follower quests? Or rather, why can't we have followers in our regular quests? Just make some of the more essential key quests to the story, where you're supposed to go in solo, locked so followers can't go with you, but all of the other ones you can bring your followers with you. I think that would be really cool. Just make it like a toggle. If you want to bring them with you, you can, but if you don't want to, just don't bring them with you. I personally don't see the reason why that isn't possible, but maybe the developers will do something cool with them in the future.
Seems like a pointless restriction, especially when a follower can sometimes accompany you into a handful of specific multiplayer urgent quests.
Exactly.
But apart from the big additions,
Just what I
Sunbreak
said.
brings a slew of quality of life improvements too. One notably smart tweak to the way you pick your pre-hunt meals lets you alter the effectiveness of each Dango ability by changing the order you select them, adding some neat decision-making to the process. You can now
It's a neat
quickly
thing,
swap
but
between
it's
two loadouts of
nothing,
switch
not a
skills
big
in the
deal.
middle of a hunt too, massively expanding your potential moveset.
Now, yeah, the
Similarly,
moves,
buddies can now be
everything about
customized
that
more
is
than
really
ever,
cool.
letting you change out special moves and skills to build the ultimate Palico without having to rely as much on finding your ideal randomized cat. There's nothing earth-shattering in all of these updates, but it's great that pretty much every system has been touched in some welcome way.
Okay, so he brings up yet another good point, that every single system that the game has in the base game was improved here in Sunbreak. So yeah, just a good note to add to the review.
Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak is a relatively simple expansion, but that doesn't mean it isn't a whole lot of fun. The new and returning monsters and locales are all top-notch, and the renewed grind is one I'm excited to spend lots more time in. That said, Sunbreak isn't nearly as substantial or surprising as Iceborne was for Monster Hunter World, lacking fresh ideas beyond clever AI followers that are restricted to single-player hunts, and even abandoning rampage quests without really trying to fill the gap their absence has left. Flying through the air on Rise's wire bugs is still an absolute blast though, and anyone who enjoyed the base game will definitely enjoy the shot in the arm Sunbreak's creative monsters provide, even if you may eventually start to feel like you're hunting through a familiar jungle in more ways than one. For more, watch me do a full hunt against Espinos with Capcom's community manager, or if you're looking for...
Okay, so that's the end of the review. He gave it a 7 out of 10. And you know how IGN is. A 7 out of 10 from IGN usually means it's like a 5 on their opinion, right? Maybe I'm being a bit facetious here. But he compares Sunbreak a lot to Iceborne. And I really dislike that because what sort of unique things did Iceborne bring to the table that Sunbreak doesn't? Other than the guiding lens, which he cannot talk about the endgame of Sunbreak, so why bring that up? And also that one hunt in Celiana where you fight off Velkhana. Other than those two specific things, what exactly is there in Iceborne that isn't in Sunbreak? I don't know, I agree with a lot of what he said in the review, but it left me with a sour taste in my mouth, so to say. Let's take a look at the comments, because I'm interested in what the people think of this. They left a comment. To those asking why we didn't talk about the endgame, Capcom specifically restricted reviews from doing so. You can hear what we were saying about it around 422.
Interesting take on its endgame. In contrast, later on, Sunbreak just ramps up monster difficulty with a small but amusing twist I can't spoil. And while that's certainly...
That's about it, 5 seconds of talking about the endgame. Which is like, why say that if you're not going to mention... If you're going to compare that to the endgame of Iceborne, why mention it? Probably shouldn't have mentioned Iceborne's endgame as a comparison to Sunbreak's if you can't mention anything about it. Yeah, that's pretty much that. Why talk about Iceborne endgame then? Yeah. If anyone's curious, he's just going to compare it to World and give it a 7. That's pretty funny. This demonstrates IGN's mediocrity when it comes to reviewing. This expansion deserves a 9.5. So far I'm loving the expansion. I'm not sure what I would rate it. I feel like I would need like 50 hours with it to be able to give it an accurate score that I would be happy with. But so far I'm loving it, and I'm just starting the endgame. Rise fixed the one thing people hate in the game of Rise, and we give it a lower score for that, right? You're trolling. Yeah, I can see why so many people are angry at IGN for this review. The follower quests are probably a test for Dragons 2, and I'm up for it. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, since they are different teams working on the games. But that is a good point, that we're probably going to have something like that in Dragon's Dogma 2. And with that being said, what do you guys think about Sunbreak? Is it a fantastic expansion or just good? Do you agree with the reviewer or not really? Let's talk about that in the comment section, and of course look forward to the bad Steam reviews, which will be uploaded in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, my name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting.